Welcome everyone to another tutorial series with Mike Page and scriptingisfun.com. Today we're going to be starting to set up a platform game tutorial. Give you a little preview of what we're going to be building here. So on our screen we have a few sprites. So in this game we're going to be looking at some 2D sprites and animations. We're going to have some mechanics which would be jumping. In a platform game, of course, we have to jump. We're going to have some simple enemy AI, like you see that enemy walking back and forth right there. We will have some ranged weapons, so we'll be able to fire, and we'll also be able to switch to a melee weapon like this sword here, and we'll talk about checkpoints and save points and a whole bunch of other things. So we're going to be having a lot of fun with this one as we learn how to put together the basic mechanics of a platform style game. So thanks for joining me for this tutorial, and let's get started. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is set up our new project here in Unity. I'm using Unity 2018 for this project. So I'm going to set up a new project here. We're going to call this platform game project. We'll set it for 2D, and I'm going to let it go to my documents, analytics off. Alright, here's our new project. I'll open up in Unity. First thing we need to do is get some sprites in here and start setting up our platforms and our ground and our objects and all of that kind of thing. So I will have some sprites available for you to download if you would like to use the ones that we're using in the project. These sprites were made by a viewer by the name of Chris Fritz. So a big thanks to Chris for making these sprites. Let's import those in here now. So I'm just dragging and dropping the sprite sheet right into my Unity asset panel. And here it is. And what we're going to need to do is slice these up in our sprite editor. We're going to use the Tilemap system in Unity to lay out our level here. So we have to get these sliced up first, and then we'll get them into a tile palette and be able to learn how to use the Tilemap system. So we're going to go to our sprite mode, change it to multiple. Since these are kind of pixel art style, we're going to change our filter mode to point, where it won't try to smooth any edges off. And we're going to hit apply. Then we'll go into our sprite editor, and here's all of our sprites in here. And these sprites are actually on a 64 by 64 grid here. So we're going to go to our slice tool here, and we're going to change it to cell size, and we're going to put 64x, 64y. We can leave a center pivot point, that should be fine, and we're going to hit slice. And once we've done that, we can zoom in here. We can see how all of our sprites are fitting inside of these little boxes here. And you can see we have a lot of sprites to play with here. We've got some frame-by-frame animations, as well as platforms and trees and other types of decorations and buildings and cars and all sorts of stuff. So I'm going to apply that change there. So now my sprites are all sliced up. You can close my sprite editor now. And then if I expand it here, you'll see that we have all the sprites in their individual pieces right here inside my asset panel. Okay, so next thing we want to do is we want to set this up to be able to use the tile maps. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is get a tile map in our scene. So we can go up here to our hierarchy, create, 2D object, tile map. That gives me this thing called grid right here, which if I click on it, you'll see it fills our scene view with a grid, and we can change the cell size over here. For now, we'll just leave it 1 unit by 1 unit. That should be fine. So here is our grid, and inside the grid we have our tile map. This is the map we're going to be able to paint tiles onto. Now that we have the tile map, the next thing we need to do is get ourselves a tile palette created. So I've already got the window open down here, tile palette, but if you don't have a tile palette window, you can just go up to Window and find Tile Palette and click that, and it'll open up your tile palette. So we need to create a new palette. So we've got our tile map here, and what we want to do here is we want to get the sprites in here that we want it to use. So we're going to go to Create New Palette. We've got our palette here. We'll just call this our sprites. Create it, and then we can just save that right here in our assets for now. Now that we have our tile palette created, we can just drag our sprites that we want to use. So I'm going to grab the whole entire sprite sheet here, and I'm just going to drop it down into our palette. Okay, let's go ahead and let this go right here in our assets folder. And what it's going to do now is it's going to generate our tile palette from our sprite. So it's importing every sprite that we have sliced apart from our sprite sheet into the tile palette. And you can see there's 249 of them, and it's currently just clicking through them all as it goes through. So we'll wait just a second for this to complete. It's now completed, so we can see down here in our palette that we have all of our tiles in our tile map, and we can start to then go through and select these and paint them out into our scene. So you can see we have all of our character animations, so some of these things we don't actually need for our actual level, but since they're on the same sprite sheet, we'll just leave them there. Alright, so the next thing to do then is to look at how we can actually start painting these tiles in. So we have a few controls here. We have a select area, we have a move selection, we have a brush where we paint our tiles in, we have a fill box, an eyedropper, an eraser, and a paint bucket. We have all sorts of tools here. Mainly though, what you can do, let's say we want this section here of this ground, we can just select it all and then just click, and we can just select it all here and then go out into our scene, and we should see that we have our tiles right there. Now you notice when I drag these out how they're not totally filling in the box, and that's because we have to go in and make a change to our sprite sheet here so that it will actually fill in an entire unit. So let's go make that change here real quick. I'm going to go back to my sprites here, and let's make sure pixels per unit are set to 64. Since they were 64 by 64 for the box, let's just go ahead and make that change. And now if I was to go down here and get my brush and pull this out, you notice how now this whole section fits out here. So what we can do is we can start with some ground down here. I just clicked to drop that in. If you want just some individual pieces, you can just click in here and get an individual piece as well. Alright, so there's a beginning set of platforms. You can see it showing up in my camera view here. Of course, this is the size of my screen right now, my camera controls with our orthographic camera. So let's just kind of take and put some basic pieces in here. You can go ahead and design yours however you like, but let's just kind of get an initial setup here. Alright, we're just going to start with something simple like this. Now, we can have multiple tile maps inside of our level here. So like these are all platforms. And what that allows us to do is it allows us to make things go before and behind things, like kind of a stacking thing. So let's go up here into our grid here, and let's change this to our platform tile map. And then we can actually add another tile map to our grid here. We can just right click it, go to 2D object, tile map. Call this, maybe we'll make one for background here. and then we can tell it which one to work in. See, right now we're working in the platform tile map. You have to make sure you switch. So now I'm on background tile map. We can tell it to focus on the tile map that we're on as well. So when I'm in background, see, there's nothing in here, so it's all grayed out. If I switch this back to platform, now you see the platforms are in here, so that can also help us to make sure that we don't go into the right one. So background objects are going to be things that we can walk in front of. So maybe we'll grab this tree right here, and let's try that again. Let's grab that tree right here, and maybe drop a tree in here, and maybe we'll try this other tree, drop him up here. Let's just drop in a few objects here that we can work with. Let's see, what else should we put in here? Maybe we grab one of these little bushes right here and stick a bush in. Stick a few bushes in. This is fun. We can be pretty creative with this. Let's see here. Maybe on the top we start using this fence right here. So we put a little fence piece up there. So these can be in our background layer. So now what we can do is we can actually assign these different tile maps to different sorting layers, which tells it how to sort the graphics. In a 2D game, all these exist in the same spot on the Z-axis, so there is no Z sorting or depth here. So let's go over here to our sorting layer. So I'm just going to click on my platform tile map, and I'm going to add a sorting layer. And I go to sorting layers and hit the plus sign, and this is going to be my platform layer. So I will go ahead and add that, and then let's add another one in, and we'll call it our background layer. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and add a third one. Let's call this our foreground. Alright, so we have 3 different sorting layers here now. So, and then we have to position these so that they go in the right position. So let's just see what we have here. Alright, so now my platform tile map, I'm going to go here to its tile map renderer. I'm going to set its sorting layer to platform. I'm going to go to the background, and I'm going to go to its sorting layer and set it to the background. Alright, now that we have some of our tiles drawn and we've gotten it into our 2 different tile maps, in the platform tile map, we want these to actually be collidable. We want to be able to walk on top of all these. So to get these to have a collider on them, first thing we need to do is add a component to the platform tile map. And what we want is a tile map collider 2D. I just searched for it by starting the type tile in there. And when you do that, you notice that it puts an individual collider around each and every sprite. And we don't necessarily need all these colliders and these individual walls here. So what we can do is we can add another component here, which is going to be a composite collider 2D. We can add that there, and then in our tile map, we can check this right here, used by composite. And when we do that, you'll see that it actually took out all the internal collider lines, and it just drew around the outside edges of our tiles here. Okay, so that's how we get the tile map to have just one kind of group collider around it. So again, we added a tile map collider 2D, and then we added a composite collider 2D, and we checked used by composite to get that to come in there. Alright, now this rigid body here, since these tiles, we don't want them to react to any kind of collisions, what we can do here is we can actually turn our body type to static, which will then tell Unity that we don't want these tiles to like move when we hit them with something else that has a rigid body. So that's going to be our setup for our colliders, getting all that set up and ready to go. So we've got some platforms, we've got a few things in our background layer here. Now in the background layer, we don't want these things to block our movement, so we're just going to not put any colliders at all on those. Those are just there kind of for artwork, and we'll be able to walk in front of them with our player. So when I made that tile palette, I kind of made the mistake of telling it just to go put it right here in the root assets folder, and we have all these tiles here sticking out here in our root folder, kind of making a mess here. So let's do this. Let's go here and let's create a new folder. We'll call this our tiles. And then let's select the first one. I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to shift click the last one so they're all selected. I'm going to scroll back up here so I can see my file. And then let's just go ahead and drag this into our tiles folder. That should move all those out of the way. Alright, if we go back to our tile palette, you can still see that the tiles are still there. We should be okay. It shouldn't have lost any of the connection to it. Alright, so out of there again. That just kind of cleans it up. Alright, now we want to be able to get that background image, so let's open up our sprite sheet here and let's find this gradient, and let's drag this out and drop it into our scene. It'll become its own game object. It's sitting back here in the middle, and let's just call this our background image, and we can just scale this background image up here. So we can grab it and then we can scale it. We can either use our scale tool here and drag in the middle and just drag it bigger, or we can scale it by hand over here in the transform. And I think instead of having it darker to lighter, I want to flip this around. So I'm going to rotate this on the z-axis 180 degrees so that it's now flipped around this way. And then we'll play with our camera here eventually, and we'll make sure that we set this to our camera size so that the camera will always see it. But for now, let's go ahead and scale it up a bit more. Let's just make it fit across our whole entire amount of platforms that we have so far. And then we can use our move tool here just to kind of move that up a bit. So maybe we have the darkest bits kind of coming off our lowest level platforms and then going up from there. So that gives us a bit of a gradient background sky. We also have this moon graphic in here. We can actually make that part of our background tile map. So let's do that too. Let's go back to our background tile map here and to our, I think I lost my tile palette. There we go. And let's find that moon. Here's the moon. So let's go ahead and select the tiles for those, and we can drag that out here into our scene. So maybe we'll just put the moon up here somewhere in the scene like that. I think we have a few clouds here we could also use. So again, just going to select some clouds. Let's drop a few clouds in here just to make it a little more interesting. Alright, that's probably enough of that for now. Okay, gives us a little more interest here in what we've got going on in our scene. Okay, I think this pretty much is our initial setup. So in this video we've set up our project as a 2D project. We talked about how to make a grid and set our grid. We talked about setting up our tile pallets and importing our sprites and getting those all ready for use. We did a real first attempt at a basic layout, and then on our platform tile map we added in a Tilemap collider and a composite collider and hooked those together so that we have all the colliders around the outside. We also made a second tile map for our background objects, which we then painted some of these trees and clouds and the moon into. And we went in and set up some sorting layers So we have a background and a platform sorting layer so that we can tell it which ones to draw on top of which ones as we go through and we work on this. So that's going to be enough for this first installment of the video. I will have a link to where these graphics can be downloaded in the description below. Take a little time and draw yourself out an initial level here. Make it look however you want to. And when we come back in the next video, we will be dropping our player character in here and getting him animating and moving around in the scene. So as always, thank you for watching. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them in the comments below. Have a great day.